To begin with, Rand Paul is a recently elected senator who's come to the body with a lot of enthusiasm, and he is willing to make hard choices. I've worked with him on Medicare reform, on Social Security reform. I think he will take on the spending situation in this country very aggressively. I think he's very brave when it comes to entitlement reform. On that side of the ledger, I find myself very much in agreement with what he wants to do. But he does have a view of foreign policy that I think is ill-suited to the times and historically has not worn very well. As Senator McCain said, history's full of moments where America and other powers felt like now's the time to withdraw and let those people argue among themselves. The problem with letting those people, and you just fill in the blank who they might be, argue among themselves, ignores the fact that what goes on in one place in the world can affect us. And no better example than 9/11. The entire operation to attack our nation cost less than $1 million. The 2021 terrorists who trained to attack us had about $1 million budget. The author of this attack lived in a cave in a faraway place called Afghanistan. So it really does matter what happens in places like Afghanistan. And radical Islamists have no desire for democracy in the Mideast or anywhere else, and they're a force within the Mideast and throughout the world. But the good news for us is that they're a minority force. The Taliban, who's a cousin of al-Qaeda basically, are very much rejected by the Afghan people. When you go to Kabul today, you see a city with electricity, with commerce, with cars, with movement, with women in school, and the average Afghan doesn't want to go back to the Taliban way of doing business, where there's no music, there's no interaction with each other, only on terms that they set for you. And so what you see on your television at night is a political struggle for the heart and soul of the Mideast. This has been going on for a long time, and finally the lid blew. Egypt was an authoritarian, corrupt dictatorship. Tunisia, Libya was ruled by Gaddafi, Syria by Assad. And what you see is people who have seen another way of living are saying, enough already. I'm not going to be part of that anymore. I'm going to try to change my life and my children's life. And within that population, you also have people who are dead set on making sure that that nation in the Islamic world goes backward, not forward, and we have to take sides. And if we don't take sides and we sit on the sidelines, we'll pay a price. I think it is better to help people fight the Taliban than it is to ignore the Taliban. I think it's good to go after al-Qaeda in every country on the planet so they never know a moment of peace, so we can have a few moments of peace. I think it's better to fight these guys in their backyard than to come home and let them come back to our backyard. There's a reason we haven't been attacked in over 11 years. We've been on the offense, and there's more ways to be on the offense than just bombing people. The biggest fear of the Taliban and al-Qaeda, beyond having a bomb dropped on their head, and they don't mind dying. They really don't like living. They will die in a heartbeat to make sure you can't live your life the way you would like. It is absolutely of no consequence to them to sacrifice their own life and take you with them, and their goal is, if we're going to live, you're going to live my way, not your way. Their big fear is that people have the capacity to say no to them and the ability to fight back and win in the countries in question. So when you kill bin Laden, that's a moment of satisfaction and justice. But has that changed the war on terror? Have the terrorists given up? Have people said, oh, the Americans killed bin Laden, we better not go over the wall in Egypt, we better not attack the consulate? No. This is a struggle between the modern world and forces of darkness, and the way America wins this war is to empower those in other countries to fight and win in their own country without us having to be there with 100,000 troops all the time. And the biggest nightmare of the Taliban and al-Qaeda is to build a one-room schoolhouse where kids can get an education. to have clean drinking water that you own and control, to be able to go to a courtroom rather than a Sharia court to have resolutions resolved, to be able to have commerce and interaction with the rest of the world, to trade with the rest of the world. That's what they fear most. And our foreign assistance budget, foreign aid, is 1% of the entire federal budget. And if you took it off the table, you're left with the following way to affect the world: do nothing or bomb people. And you know what? Those men and women in uniform have been at war for 11 years. How about having a tool in America's toolbox to fight the enemy without having to use military force? When you clear a village of the Taliban, how do you hold and build that village? You bring in a health care clinic, something at the most rudimentary standards, something that you would not even think about sending your kids to, but they welcome it because they've never had anything. Basic one-room schoolhouse with a chalkboard and a few books lights up people's lives like you would not believe. That's how you hold and build. And to the State Department, the Department of Agriculture, who are teaching people to plant crops other than heroin. That's the Al-Qaeda Taliban's worst nightmare. And Egypt and Libya and Pakistan and Yemen, and you fill in the blank, Afghanistan. Now here's where I'm going to challenge my friend Rand Paul's judgment, quite frankly. He has offered an amendment at one of the most critical times in the history of the Mideast that would sever all aid, all assistance to Libya, Egypt, and Pakistan. Why are we so upset by this thought process? Trust me, I know we're broke. $16 trillion in debt. America is struggling like any other time in my adult life, and we've got to get our fiscal house in order. But how do you live in peace and prosperity with the rest of the world in flames? And if you want to pay $10 a gallon for gas, turn the Mideast over to these crazy nut jobs. So, here's my view of what we should do. We should stay in this fight, and we should do more things than just bomb people. We should help them help themselves. And the good news is most people appreciate our help, and what you see on TV is a result not of a film, but of radical Islamists taking advantage of a moment. The cultures are different. It's hard for people in the Mideast to understand that a film could be made disrespecting Islam without the government approving of it, because in their world, nothing gets done without the government approving of it. So it's important for us to say, this has nothing to do with the United States government or the American people. This is a result of some crazy group of people who have what we call freedom of speech. It's uncomfortable, but that's the way we are. So I think it is important to let the Mideast know, and Muslims in general, that that's the way we operate. We reject the disrespect shown to anyone's religion, and that is not who we are as a people, but freedom of speech does exist here. And the reason we need to explain that is because in their world, they can't imagine something being done like this without the government blessing it. But having said that, there is no excuse in any society to do harm to another human being because of the way somebody speaks or acts, unless it's an act of violence. So, Senator Paul is proposing disengagement in 3 of the most volatile areas of the Mideast at a time when it means the most. And the way he's written this amendment should make everyone pause and evaluate how you want to vote. AIPAC, which most of us are familiar with, has indicated that the way the amendment is written, if there's an act of violence against a U.S. interest in Israel, maybe we would have to withdraw our aid to Israel. But they have said they oppose the Rand Paul amendment because they know what happens to Egypt if this thing must have passed, if it were ever to become law. The treaty that Senator McCain referred to was the Camp David Accords. Israel and Egypt have been living under a peace treaty for decades now, and part of the deal was that America would provide aid to Egypt and Israel. If we broke the agreement with Egypt, they will break the treaty with Israel. So do not tell me or anybody else that you support Israel if you vote for this amendment. Because one of the two things are going on. You have no idea what it means to support Israel, or you're trying to pull the wool over my eyes. It is impossible to say you support the security of the Israeli nation if you vote for this amendment, because it will lead to the breach of a treaty with one of their strongest neighbors, 80 million people living in Egypt. It will unravel a delicate balance that existed for decades, and I will be recorded as having no part of that. Imagine if this amendment passed. What would the chatter be on every Islamic website in the world? And by the way, if these people had a pact, they would be supporting this amendment. I know that Rand Paul is as patriotic as anybody in this body, but the fact of the matter is the crazy Islamic extremists, terrorists who try to kill us all would love nothing more than this to pass. They know they cannot win if we stay engaged helping people. So they're trying to drive us out because that's their best hope of winning the day. So, if you want to empower the terrorists that exist in this world, pass this amendment, because they will go crazy with hope and excitement about their tactics are working. And if you want to destroy the hope of everybody in the Mideast who has been brave enough to stand up to these thugs and lose their family members, if you want to break their spirit, pass this amendment. If this amendment passes, good luck finding anybody anywhere in the world who will partner with us, who would be brave enough to stand up to these thugs and say, you will not have my children's future. If this amendment passed, America could never look anyone in the eye again in the Mideast and say, stand with me. You can count on me. So, ladies and gentlemen of the United States and my colleagues in the Senate, I wish the world were not as screwed up as it is. I wish it would change, and I hate the fact we've been at war and we spent so much money. But I'm telling you this right now. These are historic times in which we live in, and every time in history that good people were confronted with evil and they blinked, millions died, not thousands. And the only reason millions haven't died in the war on terror is the nut jobs who want to kill us all can't get a hold of the weapons to do it. And if you want Iran to not get a nuclear weapon, if that bothers you that they may get a nuclear weapon and throw the whole region into a nuclear arms race, or share that technology with a terrorist organization to use it against us, then vote against this amendment. Because if this passed, what would the Iranians think about America's resolve to deal with it? And the last thing I'm going to talk about is the vision of the author of this amendment, who, honest to goodness, is a friend, but on this issue, I think he's dead wrong. In his budget, and he had the guts to write a budget, and I give him credit for that, but you need to look at the vision of the author of this amendment when it comes to our role in the world. In his budget, the American military's budget was reduced by 16% in the first year. And this foreign assistance account that I was talking about, which gives us a tool other than killing people, staying engaged and trying to build up their lives so they can live in peace with us, it's about $50 billion, about 1% of the budget. Under his proposal, it goes down to $5 billion after 2014 and frozen there forever. So I want to let you know that the author of this amendment believes that you can gut the military, and that's exactly what he does with military spending, Take all the assets we have to help people off the table and we'll be safe. Now, how in the world could somebody believe that given the times in which we live in, it's a good idea to take military spending below historic levels and disengage from the world and have absolutely no influence on nations other than trying to use military force? So I hope my colleagues will come to the floor and resist the temptation to do something that sounds good in a 30-second soundbite. I know people are frustrated and war-weary, and I know we're broke, and you'd like to just leave everybody else alone, but they're not going to leave you alone. And look how much money we spent after 9/11. Look what 20 people can do to this nation if we disengage from the world.